Okay, welcome to Cashflow Lab. Today we're looking at something of a paradox.
hmm
New Zealand. When you think about it, it's admired all over the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. You picture, those incredible landscapes, clean air, stable government.
Yeah, high standard of living, good schools, this whole egalitarian vibe.
Yeah.
It really sounds like the dream, the place everyone wants to move to.
It definitely has that paradise image, and for good reason in many ways.
Yeah.
But if you sort of scratch beneath that surface, look at the numbers, the economy,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's a puzzle.
A big one.
Yeah. And that's really our mission today. If New Zealand is this amazing dreamland, why on earth is it losing so many of its people?
Yeah.
We're talking one of the highest emigration rates out there.
And it's who is leaving that's really striking. It's not just anyone. The sources are pretty clear on this.
Right. It's overwhelmingly the young, productive workers, often highly educated, people just starting their careers.
Exactly. The ones you'd think a country would fight to keep. Losing them is a massive blow to the future, right? So we're going to dive deep into NZ's unique economic situation. Why is life there beautiful? Yeah, but also getting really unaffordable. And maybe even more importantly for this group, why does it seem to lack those top-tier career opportunities?
It's fascinating, isn't it, how that incredible natural beauty and high-income status can almost mask this really deep-seated structural problem, a problem that's tied right into its geography, its size, and frankly, some of its economic policies.
Okay, so let's start with the scale of this brain drain, because relative to NZ's size, the numbers are, oh, they're pretty shocking.
They really are. It's a small country, remember, only about, what, 5.3 million people?
Right, you could fit the whole population into Sydney or Melbourne, basically.
Exactly. So when you see its rate of people leaving per capita, it's just extraordinarily high.
How high are we talking?
Well, the sources point out that per capita, it's sometimes comparable to smaller countries facing, serious crises, even active conflicts in some cases.
Wow. That comparison alone tells you this isn't just young people doing their their overseas experience.
Not at all. This is systemic. It suggests a real failure to hold on to its own human capital. And that really threatens the economy long term.
And like we said, it's who is leaving. The people with degrees, specialized skills, the potential innovators, entrepreneurs.
The future tax base, essentially. The people who should be driving growth, starting businesses, they're heading out the door.
So where are they mainly going?
Australia. That's the big magnet. It's actually hard to overstate the scale of this. Right now, more than 10%.
10%.
Yeah, more than 10% of the entire New Zealand population lives in Australia. Permanently.
That's incredible. Just try to imagine that for other countries, like you said, 10% of the U.S. and Canada, or Germany and France.
It's a massive ongoing shift. It just shows you the sheer economic pull Australia has.
And that closeness, the ease of moving, that's obviously a huge factor. We definitely need to unpack that whole relationship later on.
Absolutely. It makes leaving incredibly simple.
But here's the weird thing. Even with all these skilled Kiwis leaving, New Zealand's overall population is still growing. How does that work?
Yeah. That growth is well, it's a bit misleading. It masks the real issue.
How so?
Because the growth is almost entirely fueled by immigration. People coming in mainly to fill the gaps left by those skilled Kiwis who are leaving.
Okay, so it's like a replacement system.
Sort of. But it sets up this really challenging and expensive cycle. You invest all this money educating your own people, your domestic talent, and then they leave.
And you have to bring in workers from overseas to replace them.
Right. But hang on, if you're just swapping workers, why is that necessarily a big structural problem?
Well, because the people coming in often face the exact same problems that pushed the Kiwis out in the first place.
Okay. Like the low wages, the crazy house prices, the limited career paths.
Precisely. So what happens? For many immigrants, New Zealand becomes, well, temporary, a stepping stone.
Right. They might not have that deep connection, that cultural tie that a native-born Kiwi has.
And
And then quite often, they make the same move across the Tasman to Australia. We'll get into this later. It's sometimes called the backdoor route to Australia.
so it's like a revolving door for talent. New Zealand pays to recruit and settle people.
Only to lose many of them once they realize the opportunities just aren't there long term, or once they get NZ residency or citizenship, which makes moving to Australia easy. It's a costly cycle.
So why is that economic ceiling so low? Why the lack of opportunity? You mentioned geography and size earlier.
Yeah, those are really the fundamental constraints. Think about it. New Zealand is tiny, population-wise. We said Sydney-sized. And it's incredibly remote. miles from major global markets.
And those two things together, the small scale and the isolation,
Yeah.
they create huge hurdles.
Massive hurdles, especially for building globally competitive industries.
Yeah.
If you can't get scale and your shipping costs are high because you're so far away, it's really tough.
Right. Take something like manufacturing or heavy industry. The sources say pretty much anything NZ could make.
It can be done cheaper, bigger, and closer to the main shipping routes, especially in Asia.
So competing on cost or speed is almost impossible for many goods. You're limited to mostly local markets.
Exactly. And it's not just factories. It hits advanced sectors, too. Think
Right.
about financial services.
Usually a big export for developed countries.
Right. But finance needs global integration, strategic location. Why would a major international bank choose Auckland as its main regional hub?
Okay, good question. What's the advantage of, say, Singapore?
Well, Singapore has deliberately positioned itself for decades as that central hub for Asia. It's perfectly located, time zone-wise, between Europe and Asia. Auckland is, well, it's way out on the edge.
And the New Zealand dollar, while stable, doesn't have the same clout.
Exactly. It just doesn't compete with the depth, the volume, the recognition of markets like Singapore, or, crucially, Sydney.
The Sydney factor again. So even for businesses focused just on Australasia.
Sydney is the obvious choice most of the time. Bigger market, more recognized currency, larger talent pool, more competitors creating that ecosystem effect.
Right.
And because the political and legal links between Australia and NZ are so incredibly close, we keep coming back to this. Big international firms find they can base their main regional operations in Sydney.
Their lawyers, their top managers, their finance teams.
Yeah, all in Sydney. And they can still easily service their New Zealand clients or operations from there.
So Sydney basically sucks up all those high-end jobs that might otherwise exist in Auckland or Wellington.
It acts like an economic siphon, absolutely. It pulls away the very jobs that could offer those high-paying career paths that educated Kiwis are looking for.
So if global industries struggle because of scale and distance, what's left? What does work in NZ?
Well, it's basically the industries that have to be physically located there. The must-be there sectors.
Like tourism, obviously.
Tourism, yes. Local services, banking for locals, retail, healthcare, essential infrastructure, maybe some specific regional maritime stuff.
But those aren't necessarily creating lots of diverse, high-growth, specialized jobs for university graduates.
Not really. They meet domestic needs, they bring in some money, but they just aren't broad enough or deep enough to absorb all the educated talent the country produces. You end up with this bottleneck, lots of qualified people chasing too few suitable local jobs.
Okay, so let's talk about the pillars that do support the economy. Agriculture is a big one, right? NZ's famous for it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real powerhouse. One of the most productive agricultural nations in the world, especially given its size. They've got the fertile land, the water, and they use technology incredibly well.
And being in the Southern Hemisphere helps too.
Massively. It gives them a huge export advantage. They can grow food, fruit, veg, dairy, lamb when it's off-season in the bigger Northern Hemisphere markets, particularly Asia. That generates serious export dollars.
Here's the catch, right? We're talking about brain drain, skilled workers leaving. Does farming offer them many jobs?
That's the critical point.
Yeah.
This is advanced, high-tech farming. It's highly mechanized, very capital-intensive.
But not very labor-intensive.
Exactly. It doesn't actually need that many people on the ground. The jobs it does offer are often quite specialized. You know, agricultural engineers, data scientists, managing yields, logistics experts.
High-value jobs, but not huge numbers of them.
Right. And frankly, most of the well-educated, city-based Kiwis who are leaving. They're not looking for farm work, and the sector isn't big enough in employment terms to absorb them anyway. So farming brings in the money, but it doesn't create the careers needed to keep that talent at home.
Okay, so that leads us to the other huge pillar. And this is the one that seems, well, kind of shocking when you look at the numbers. Housing.
Yeah. The economy is incredibly reliant on property, massively skewed towards it.
How skewed?
Well, when you break down the economy, the biggest chunks are all activities centered around housing.
Like what specifically?
Selling houses, renting them out, building new ones, financing all of that through banks and mortgage brokers, plus all the government and legal stuff that goes with it.
And the sources highlighted a truly staggering figure for this.
Yeah. You pull all those housing-related industries together, and it makes up something like, wait for it, half of the entire country's economic output.
Half the economy, just revolving around houses.
That's extraordinary. And this creates what you could call a housing economy trap.
Meaning?
Meaning, if half your economic activity depends on the property market, then keeping property values high, or at least stable, becomes the #1 national priority, almost regardless of who's in power.
And that leads directly to...
New Zealand having some of the most unaffordable housing in the developed world, even though it's sparsely populated with loads of land.
So the whole system is kind of geared towards protecting property wealth, maybe more than creating affordable homes or diverse jobs.
That's a fair way to put it. Think about the politics. Homeowners are a huge voting bloc. Try telling them you're bringing in policies that might make their biggest asset worth less.
Yeah, that's political suicide.
Pretty much. And from an investment angle, why would you risk your capital on some uncertain tech startup when you can get almost guaranteed, often tax-advantaged returns just by parking your money in property?
So the easy money in housing crowds out investment in other, maybe more innovative sectors.
It certainly seems to contribute to that, yeah. It distorts investment decisions.
And governments have tried to step in, right? Like the foreign buyer ban.
They did. And, the idea sounded good, but it didn't really work.
Why not?
Well, first, foreign buyers were only ever a tiny fraction of the market anyway, maybe 3% before the ban,
Oh.
tackling a symptom, not the root cause, which is the domestic reliance on housing wealth.
And the other huge issue with that ban.
The Australian loophole. Because of those super close ties we talked about, the ban specifically did not apply to Australians.
Ah, and Australians were.
The biggest group of foreign buyers anyway, especially for things like holiday homes in Queenstown or investment properties. Plus, Australia has hefty stamp duties on property purchases. NZ doesn't nearly as much. So NZ property looks like a really attractive, tax-efficient investment for wealthy Aussies.
So the ban blocked the small players, but let the biggest foreign influence continue.
Exactly. Fatal flaw. Now, more recently, the government has made some tax changes to make investment properties less attractive, and that has cooled prices a bit, taken some heat out.
But still, compared to other countries, housing affordability is a massive problem, especially for young people on NZ wages.
It's still a huge hurdle, absolutely. Prices remain incredibly high relative to incomes.
Okay, so this is really important. The easy assumption is Kiwis leave because houses are too expensive.
Right, that's the immediate, obvious explanation.
But the sources suggest it's more complicated than that. It's not just about cheap homes.
Exactly. Because if it was only about affordability, why would more than half of them move to Australia?
Especially to cities like Sydney or Melbourne, which are often just as expensive, if not more so, than Auckland.
Precisely. That move doesn't make sense if your only goal is a cheaper mortgage. They're clearly chasing something else.
Opportunity.
Opportunity. That's the real driver.
Yeah.
These skilled people are looking for jobs, for careers, for industries that just don't exist at scale, or sometimes at all, in New Zealand's smaller, more remote economy. They're trading the lifestyle for professional advancement.
This makes me think of that career gravity well idea.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Highly specialized professions. Think about, I don't know, a top-tier AI researcher or a curator for a major international art museum, or maybe a lawyer specializing in complex global finance deals.
Or managing massive infrastructure projects.
Right. Those kinds of roles, they naturally cluster in big commercial centers. Why?
Because that's where the demand is. The funding, the networks, the related businesses.
Exactly. A smaller market just can't support that density of highly specialized, high-value roles. A medical researcher needs the big universities, the big hospitals, the pharma companies all nearby. That scale only exists in the world's major cities.
And for New Zealand, the nearest, most accessible major cities with that kind of critical mass?
Aren't in New Zealand. They're across the Tasman, Sydney, Melbourne.
And maybe London or Vancouver sometimes too, but Australia's the main one.
By far. So it's brain drain driven by economic limits, but made incredibly easy by that political closeness with Australia.
That near EU relationship, as you called it.
Yeah. It's the great facilitator. Kiwis and Aussies can live, work, buy property in either country with almost zero hassle. No visas, no complex immigration processes.
That really lowers the barrier to leaving, doesn't it? It's less like emigrating and more like just moving cities for a better job, but the city happens to be in another country.
That's exactly what it feels like for many. And it goes beyond jobs, too. Education is a big pull factor.
How so?
Australia just has more and often larger universities. Bigger research budgets, maybe. And critically, for Kiwis who meet certain criteria, they get treated like local students for tuition fees and student loans.
Okay, so if you want to do something really competitive and expensive, like medicine, And there aren't many spots in NZ.
Australia looks like a very attractive and, importantly, affordable option. The sources mention anecdotal evidence suggesting that for some postgraduate courses, a really significant chunk of the students are actually from New Zealand.
Wow, so you're losing ambitious young talent even before they hit the workforce.
It pulls them out of the NZ system early.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, there's the cultural fit.
Easy transition.
Super easy. Same language, very similar cultures. A Kiwi moving to Australia faces far fewer hurdles, less chance of feeling like an outsider than migrants going to completely different cultures. It's the path of least resistance to greater opportunity.
Okay, so NZ is losing its own skilled people, and it's bringing in immigrants to fill the gaps. This leads to another weird dynamic, doesn't it? This backdoor idea.
Yes, the immigration paradox. It's perhaps one of the most, well, dysfunctional outcomes of this whole situation.
It sounds like NZ is trying to plug its own leaks, but ends up helping Australia grow instead.
That's pretty much it. Because New Zealand needs workers so urgently to support its aging population, keep services running, its immigration system is often seen as, relatively speaking, easier or faster to get into than Australia's or Canada's or the UK's, which are highly competitive.
So how would that work for someone whose ultimate goal is maybe Sydney or Melbourne?
Well, a skilled person from, say, somewhere in Asia
Yeah.
might find it quicker to get a work visa and then permanent residency in New Zealand. The NZ government is actively looking for people.
Okay.
Then, once they secure that NZ status, especially citizenship, but often PR is enough, they can just pack their bags and move to Australia. Legally. Easily. Thanks to those Trans-Tasman agreements.
So New Zealand effectively acts as like a processing center, a stepping stone.
An expensive state-funded transit lounge is one way to think about it. NZ invests the time, the money, the resources in vetting and settling these migrants.
Only for a good number of them to then leave for the bigger opportunities in Australia as soon as they can.
Right. And this is often amplified by what you might call an attachment gap.
Meaning?
Well, someone who came to NZ mainly just to get the passport or residency might not feel the same deep connection as someone born and raised there. For them, NZ might be seen more as a means to an end, the end being life in Australia. They're naturally going to be more likely to make that final jump.
So if this keeps happening, you lose your own ambitious young people, and you bring in ambitious people who are also likely to leave. Where does that lead? The sources seem pretty worried about the long-term picture.
They paint a stark scenario, yeah. The quote that stands out is the risk of New Zealand becoming an expensive retirement home for wealthy Australians and Kiwis to enjoy their views while being served by a service workforce just waiting for their own turn to jump ship to Australia.
That's a pretty brutal assessment.
It's definitely an exaggeration to make a point, but it highlights the danger, right? Relying on tourism and wealthy retirees served by a constantly churning temporary workforce. It's not a sustainable model for a dynamic economy.
Which brings up the obvious political question. If this open relationship with Australia is causing such problems for NZ's economy and workforce, why don't they just tighten things up, restrict the movement?
Politically, it's almost unthinkable. Just look at the numbers again.
That 10% living in Australia.
Exactly. That's a massive group of NZ citizens with strong interests, jobs, families, property in Australia. They would fight tooth and nail against any policy that made their lives harder or restricted their rights there.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the people still in New Zealand? Wouldn't they support a policy that might help the national economy?
You'd think so, but for many Kiwis within NZ, that freedom to move is actually really valuable on a personal level.
How?
Like an insurance policy.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. It's an escape hatch. If things get tough at home, if they hit that career ceiling we talked about, the option to easily move to Australia for better pay or opportunities is incredibly important. It gives them personal flexibility.
So for the individual, the benefit of keeping that door open outweighs the cost to the country's overall economy.
For a lot of people, yes. The sheer number of people on both sides of the Tasman who value that freedom makes it politically untouchable, really. Any government trying to restrict it would face a huge backlash.
Okay, so the brain drain is real, the backdoor effect is happening. Is it all doom and gloom, though? Is there any upside or counterbalance?
Well, it's not entirely a one-way street of permanent loss. There's a nuance here that offers a bit of hope, kind of a delayed return.
Oh, how does that work?
Many of those Kiwis who leave in their 20s don't actually stay away forever.
They come back.
A significant number do, yeah. Often later in their careers, maybe in their late 30s, 40s. They decide they want the NZ lifestyle, maybe to raise a family.
And when they come back?
They bring back really valuable stuff. International experience, management skills learned overseas, often in Australia, and crucially, they often bring back significant savings. Capital.
Ah, so they inject money back into the NZ economy.
Exactly. Buying houses, maybe starting their own specialized businesses using the skills they gained abroad, or taking up senior roles in NZ companies. So while the initial drain hurts, there is this delayed boomerang effect that brings back skills and cash, offsetting some of the loss.
That's a really important point. It softens the blow a bit. What about the government's ability to actually do something? If they wanted to tackle housing costs or create more jobs, do they have the financial firepower?
Actually, yes, compared to a lot of other developed countries struggling with huge debts.
NZ's government finances are in pretty good shape.
Relatively speaking, yes. They tend to have a lower debt-to-GDP ratio. That gives them options. It means they have the financial wiggle room, the capacity to potentially fund big initiatives if they decide to.
Like what?
Things like major infrastructure projects to boost productivity, government programs to try and stimulate new industries, or even significant investment in building more affordable housing. The money could be there if the political will was strong enough.
Okay. But maybe NZ's biggest strength isn't even economic. You mentioned the lifestyle, the environment earlier.
That's probably the ultimate anchor. The intangible stuff.
The things you can't easily measure but everyone values.
Exactly. Why can New Zealand successfully sell golden visas to billionaires or convince wealthy Aussie retirees to buy expensive lake houses?
Because it's safe, stable, clean, beautiful.
Precisely. That inherent quality, the safety, the political stability, the stunning environment that has immense value, it commands a premium in today's world.
So that basic desirability acts as a safety net.
In a way, yes. As long as NZ protects those core assets, its stability, rule of law, environment there will likely always be demand. A queue of people wanting to come, whether it's investors seeking a safe haven, retirees seeking tranquility, or migrants looking for that first step.
Yeah. It creates a permanent demand, especially for property, which props up that part of the economy, even if the brain drain continues.
It provides a sort of baseline resilience, yeah.
Yeah.
The country has something unique and globally desirable to offer, even while it struggles to create enough high-end opportunities to keep all its own brightest talent at home. #outro.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together for you, the listener. What we've seen is this really stark contrast in New Zealand.
A real paradox.
You've got this incredible natural beauty, safety, stability, all the things that make it look like paradise. But that's rubbing up against the hard realities of a small, very remote economy.
An economy that struggles with scale, faces high logistics costs, and has become, maybe worryingly, over-reliant on the housing market. About half the economy, remember.
Which leads directly to those core issues. Wages that often lag behind some of the world's highest house prices, and critically, a shortage of those specialized high-paying career paths.
And that lack of opportunity becomes painfully obvious because Australia, with its bigger economy and higher wages, is right next door. And the door between the two countries is wide open.
So Australia acts like this huge magnet, pulling away NZ's young, skilled workers. And NZ inadvertently ends up being a stepping stone for other global migrants heading to Australia, too.
It's a tough dynamic. That freedom of movement is great for individuals, giving them options.
But it creates this ongoing structural headache for the New Zealand economy as a whole, a headache that's politically very difficult to cure.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. New Zealand clearly relies heavily on selling its stability and scenery to wealthy retirees, global billionaires. That brings in money for sure.
So is the current focus maybe less on the really hard work of keeping its own homegrown talent by diversifying the economy and boosting wages?
And more on just attracting existing wealth, capitalizing on its status as a beautiful safe haven. And if that is the main strategy, can it ever really lead to a stable, dynamic workforce and the kind of diverse economy needed for the long term?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on Cashflow Lab. Subscribe for more real economic breakdowns without the hype.